The champagne was still cold. Not metaphorically. Literally. The condensation was dripping down the green glass, forming a perfect ring on the marble countertop I spent 3 years fantasizing about while washing dishes in a sink with no hot water. There were 2 glasses. One for her, one for me, both untouched. Instead, there was an envelope. Thick, cream-colored, expensive, like it had been picked out weeks ago, like someone had planned this to be elegant. I had just returned from signing away my patent to a company with more lawyers than engineers, and I now had exactly $67 million. 00 in my business account. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even her. I wanted it to be a surprise. The surprise was mine. She wasn't crying, wasn't yelling. She was wearing a black blouse and jeans, no shoes. Hair pulled back, calm, like she was about to give a TED talk on how to vaporize your husband emotionally in under 3 minutes. Just sign it, she said. No explanation, no apology, just paperwork. And the sickest part? She used the good pen. The fountain pen I bought her on our first anniversary. The one she said was too beautiful to use on anything sad. Telephone receiver 12 hours earlier. 12 hours before the ambush, I was on a conference call with 4 men I'll never meet in person who decided my invention was worth more than every dollar I'd earned in my entire life, combined. They said the word life-changing twice. They said congrats 5 times. When the wire transfer hit, I stared at the screen for 44 minutes without blinking. I didn't scream, didn't laugh. I just felt tired. I texted her, big night. Be home by 8. Trust me. She replied, K. Scarf the closet clue. Here's where it gets weird. As I poured the champagne, because yes, I still believed we were going to toast, I noticed something missing. Her red scarf. She wore that scarf on every major life moment. Job interviews, funerals, our engagement dinner. She once said it made her feel anchored, but it was gone. Not in the closet. Not on the coat rack. Then I checked the hamper. Empty. Then the bathroom drawers. Hers were half open, half empty. I stood still for a long time. My ears started ringing. You know that high-pitched noise when the world goes silent before impact? Yeah, that. Fountain pen, don't make this dramatic. Those were her exact words. After I opened the envelope, after I read the words petitioner, Mira K. Ellison in the upper left corner, I asked her when she made this decision. She said, when you stopped needing me. Which is funny, because 5 weeks earlier she said I was the one who needed her too much. I tried to speak, but my throat didn't work. My hands were shaking. My body felt like it didn't belong to me. She sat on the stool across from me and drank the champagne from my glass. I said, was it ever real? She didn't answer, just wiped her lips, stood up, and walked out the front door like a movie scene that had been storyboarded months in advance. The next morning, I woke up on the kitchen floor. I hadn't meant to sleep, didn't even realize I had, but the weight of everything must have crushed me into unconsciousness. The champagne bottle had tipped over. One glass shattered, the other still half full, with her lipstick smeared across the rim. At first, I thought it had been a dream. A bad one. A symbolic nightmare born out of stress and success colliding too violently. But then I turned my head and saw the envelope, just where she'd left it, taunting me like a tombstone. I didn't move for a while. I just laid there staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the exact moment Mira had stopped being my person and started being a person I didn't know at all. I couldn't pinpoint it. That's what scared me the most. I couldn't find the crack. There had just been silence, and then collapse. Eventually, I stood up, showered, and stared at my reflection for longer than any sane man should. I looked like a ghost. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was just blank. Like someone had paused the movie of my life mid-frame. That's when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. No caller ID. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. A man's voice came through. Calm, polite, slightly amused. Is this Elias? He asked. I hesitated. Yeah. Who is this? He paused, then said, someone who thought you should know. Mira was never planning to stay once the money hit your account. My heart slammed into my ribs. Excuse me. She's been preparing for this for a while, he said. She used your NDA drafts. Leaked your pitch deck 6 months ago. And she's not working alone. What the hell are you talking about? I snapped, my voice cracking. You'll understand soon, he said. Check your email. Look for a message from a Claudia. You're not crazy, Elias. but you were being played. Then the line went dead. I stood there frozen, the phone still pressed against my ear, even though the call had ended. The silence in the house felt different now, like it wasn't empty, but listening. I rushed to my laptop. My inbox was a mess, hundreds of unread messages, congratulations, PR inquiries, media requests. But buried deep, time-stamped at 3:07 a.m., was an email from Claudia. Grove. Inquiry at protonmail.com. No subject line. No greeting. Just an attachment labeled mirror_glass. Zip, and a single sentence. I kept copies. She never deleted them. I didn't open it right away. I paced. I panicked. Part of me didn't want to know, because knowing would mean everything I thought I'd earned, protected, and sacrificed for was a rigged game. But curiosity and rage finally won. I extracted the file. Inside were dozens of PDFs, scans of documents, screenshots of chats, internal meeting summaries between Mira and two men I'd never heard of. Their emails were blacked out, but not their messages. One of them had written, "Once he cashes out, file immediately. Emotional collapse makes him easier to manage in court. Stick to the timeline." Timeline. There was an Excel sheet titled Exit Plan, Final. And there it was. A 9-month-long spreadsheet detailing every move. When to change her phone password. When to stop sharing location. When to fake interest in the project. When to buy burner accounts. When to hire her own forensic accountant. And the final row, dated Wednesday, 7 p.m. Read. Deliver envelope. Say nothing. Let him spiral. I couldn't breathe. I had to grip the edge of my desk to stay standing. My head buzzed like an air raid siren. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a hostile operation. Cold. Strategic. Precise. It had never been about us. Not even for a second. And yet, part of me still wanted to ask why. I needed to see her face when I asked. I needed her to lie, just so I could stop hoping she'd tell the truth. But first, I needed to find out who the hell Claudia was, and how she had these files. Because if Mira planned this much, what else was she hiding? The name haunted me for hours. Claudia. No last name, no profile photo, no social trace I could find. Just a Proton mail address and a hurricane's worth of classified files she somehow smuggled out from Myra's private vault. I didn't even know Mira had secrets this deep. She was never tech-savvy. She struggled to switch between HDMI inputs. But somehow, there were burner accounts, encrypted threads, file-sharing logs, and spreadsheets so detailed it made it feel like I'd been married to a project, not a person. Still, Claudia was real, and she knew things. I replied to the email with trembling hands, writing and deleting 3 drafts before finally settling on. "Why are you helping me?" No response. Not that hour. Not that day. The silence was deafening. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I just stared at the wall, running numbers in my head, trying to calculate how many lies Mira would have had to tell to pull this off. How many days of pretending. How many nights she crawled into bed beside me, knowing I was just a countdown. By the next morning, I was unraveling. Not emotionally. I was past emotions, but mechanically. I was losing function. My eyes twitched. I forgot to shower. My phone vibrated constantly from media outlets wanting interviews about the young inventor who cashed out. They didn't know the inventor was living in a house that felt like a crime scene, too scared to open closets because her scent still lingered there. Then finally, at 2:43 a.m., Claudia responded. No pleasantries. No explanation. Just an address. Don't bring your phone. Burn this email. 11 a.m. tomorrow. Front booth. It was a diner on the edge of the industrial zone. I knew the place. Old. Dusty. Looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Half the neon letters didn't light up. A good place to disappear, or be disappeared. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat with my laptop, rereading every message Mira had sent me over the last 6 months, trying to hear her voice behind them, searching for hidden meaning where there was probably just contempt. By morning, I was in the booth. I arrived an hour early and drank 3 cups of burnt coffee until my hands were shaking. The waitress, her name tag said Jen, asked if I wanted food. I said no. She smiled like she understood. Then, at exactly 11 a.m., Claudia walked in. She looked nothing like I expected. Mid-40s, dark hair tied back, large coat, and eyes like she'd seen wars no one wrote about. She slid into the booth without saying a word and looked straight at me. No pity. No fear. Do you still love her? She asked. It was the first thing she said. No hello. No confirmation of her identity. Just that. I blinked, startled. What? I don't know. Why does that matter? Because, she said calmly, if you do, you'll make the mistake of trying to protect her once this gets ugly. She reached into her bag and placed a flash drive on the table between us. That's not a backup. That's the original trail. Everything Mira deleted, everything she buried, every lie she was told to tell you. To tell me. I repeated. What do you mean told? Claudia leaned in, voice low. Your wife wasn't the mastermind. She was the delivery system. There's a firm, call them legal architects. They build exits for wealthy spouses. Ultra-targeted divorces. They work in shadows. They recruited her, and they used her access to your work to test something bigger. My pulse spiked. Used her how? They used your patent as bait. You were part of a data profile test. See how long it would take a high-value, emotionally dependent partner to self-destruct under engineered stress. I stared at her, stunned. So I was, what? A lab rat? Claudia shrugged. More like a case study. But you surprised them. They didn't expect you to keep your IP off cloud, or to lock down the funds post-transfer. That's why she panicked and filed early. I looked down at the flash drive. I didn't touch it. Why are you giving me this? I asked. Claudia took a slow breath. Because I helped build the model that picked you. And I stayed quiet. Until now. My throat tightened. So, you worked for them? She nodded. I did. Until they tried it on my brother. A long silence passed. Then she slid a burner phone across the table. They're going to try to bury you, Elias. Not just take your money. They want to rewrite your entire reputation. The genius who snapped. The husband who cracked. If you don't play this smart, you won't just lose Mira. You'll lose your name. I took the flash drive. And that's when she said the thing that haunts me most. You think she betrayed you? She asked, standing. You haven't even seen who she really works for. Then she left. Just like that. No name. No contact. No second chances. And suddenly, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was at war. I didn't go home after the meeting with Claudia. I couldn't. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was a memory soaked in perfume, paper-thin lies, and the faint echo of her voice saying things I now knew were scripted. I drove aimlessly for hours, circling the city's outer highways, staring through the windshield like the answers were hiding in the trees or traffic signs. The flash drive sat in my jacket pocket like it was burning a hole through the fabric. The burner phone stayed in the glove compartment, screen turned off, battery removed. Claudia's instructions had been clear. They might be watching, and they'd be patient about it. Eventually, I pulled into a self-storage facility off Highway 212, one of those gray, concrete box labyrinths with numbers stenciled in peeling paint. I rented a unit in cash, slid the metal door shut behind me, and sat on the cold floor with my laptop. The flash drive clicked in. There was no fancy interface, no password screen, no folder tree. Just a single folder named Architect. Inside were 6 subfolders, all labeled by dates, most from the last year. One was from 2 years ago, another from just 3 weeks back. I opened the earliest one first, and what I saw froze me. It wasn't legal documents. It wasn't financial data. It was photos, dozens of them. Some grainy, some high-res. Every single one of me. Me at my old office, walking out of coffee shops, sitting in my garage working on the prototype, speaking at a small conference 2 years ago. Some were from angles that could have only come from inside my house. One showed me asleep on the couch. I stared at it for a full minute, like it would explain itself. My mouth was dry. My ears rang. The metadata showed timestamps, going back 18 months. This wasn't last-minute snooping. This was sustained. Deliberate. There was also a folder labeled Psych Eval, Subject E. I clicked it, expecting more photos. Instead, it was a PDF transcript, conversations between someone named K, and a field operative referred to only as Lark. They were discussing me. Subject E displays consistent signs of obsessive resilience. Emotional dependency is moderate, but spiking under targeted neglect stimuli. Recommend Phase 2. Escalated withdrawal paired with false intimacy markers. There were pages of this. Dozens. They were testing how I would respond to Myra's behavior. Every fight, every passive-aggressive shrug, every fake reconciliation, it had been modeled, monitored. They weren't just spying on me. They were tuning her behavior like an algorithm. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the laptop. I curled up on the concrete, knees to chest, like I was trying to keep myself from falling through the floor. I thought I was losing my wife. What I was really losing was the illusion that anything in the last 2 years had been real. And then I saw a photo that changed everything. Folder dated 2022 to 2003. It was a picture of Mira in a restaurant. Across from her sat a man I'd never seen before. Tall, silver hair, thick glasses. He looked like a history professor or a retired senator. Nothing remarkable. But the way he was leaning toward her, the way she was looking at him, it wasn't flirtation. It wasn't affection. It was instructional, like he was telling her what to do. There were more photos. Mira meeting this man in different places. Always in public, always discreet. Each file was named Session, followed by a number. The last one was labeled Session 13. There wasn't a Session 14. And then I found the kicker. A document titled Key Figure. Callahan, Ezra J. That name. It felt familiar. I Googled it. And instantly, my screen flooded with results. Mostly corporate law filings, deep redacted PDFs, and dry merger statements. But buried halfway down the page, I found an old forum thread, one from a whistleblower community. Ezra Callahan, former behavioral systems consultant, blacklisted in 2016. Rumored to be behind Project Marrow, an experimental psychological manipulation program designed for high-asset divorce consulting, quietly shut down after someone died during a breakdown scenario in Prague. Except now it wasn't shut down. It had just gone private. And apparently, I was subject D. I sat there for a long time in that freezing concrete box, wondering how many others like me were out there. Men, or maybe women, who thought they were just going through rough patches, unaware they were being handled like cattle. But if Ezra Callahan was involved, that meant Mira wasn't some rogue gold digger. She was an asset, a paid participant in something that had now crossed into federal crime territory. The rage didn't come immediately. It never does with me. It seeped in slow, like groundwater under a door, until I couldn't move without stepping in it. I packed up the laptop, relocked the storage unit, and drove back toward the city. Not home. I didn't trust that space anymore. I checked into a dingy motel near the airport, paid in cash, and laid on the scratchy bedspread staring at the ceiling tiles, thinking one thought over and over. If they spent this much effort on breaking me, what the hell were they trying to hide? I didn't leave the motel for 2 days. Not to eat, not to shower. Just sat there on the creaky mattress surrounded by piles of printouts, screenshots, burner phone notes, and diagrams I'd scrawled on napkins and motel stationery like some basement conspiracy theorist. Except I wasn't paranoid anymore. I wasn't imagining anything. The enemy was real. The threat was real. The heartbreak had evolved into something colder, more precise. I wasn't mourning Mira anymore. I was tracking her. And I was starting to suspect that even she didn't understand the depth of the pit she'd dug herself into. The name Ezra Callahan kept clawing its way back into my head. I stared at his photo like it might blink. The man looked ordinary. Average height, soft jawline, wireframe glasses, but the kind of eyes that felt like they were 2 moves ahead of everything you said. I searched everything I could find on him. Scraped through AltNet archives, court databases, foreign news bulletins. There were no interviews, no recordings, not even a video clip, just mentions. A shadow of a person who had clearly pulled strings for a long time without ever leaving fingerprints. He was listed as the former director of behavioral testing for a research group called August Section, but what really hit me was a redacted PDF I found buried in an old FOIA leak repository, just 24 pages long, half of them blacked out. A patient referred to only as EM was listed as undergoing simulated detachment immersion therapy under the Marrow protocol. The rest was ink. The date? 3 years ago. And the location? A private care facility just outside Laurel Falls, North Carolina. I'd never heard of it. But one look at the header, confidential, internal use only, was enough to make my gut twist. Whatever this place was, it wasn't a hospital in the traditional sense. It looked more like a behavioral lab disguised as a clinic. Staffed by consultants. Funded by shell corporations. Probably unlicensed. Probably dangerous. I plugged the name of the facility into a darknet social graphing tool I'd picked up years ago during my engineering work with cybersecurity firms. It took nearly an hour to index and link cross-referenced employees, billing invoices, and shipping logs. When it finished, a single thread blinked on screen, connecting the facility to a medical supply distributor registered under an alias, MK Services LLC. That was the exact same name Mira had written down 2 years ago on a crumpled notepad she left in the kitchen when she was prepping for a work trip. I remember because I asked her if MK stood for Michael Kors, and she laughed, called me a dork, and said it was just boring corporate stuff. Back then, I believed her. Now, I felt like I'd found a secret passage beneath a familiar floorboard. I dug deeper. MK Services had one active phone number listed. I called it. It rang once, then disconnected. A minute later, the burner phone buzzed. New message. No contact. Stop digging. There is no EM. That was all. For words. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Cold, calculated, and worse. It confirmed what I was starting to suspect. There absolutely was an EM. Which meant someone out there didn't want me finding out who they were. And if this patient file had anything to do with Mira, or me, then this went beyond betrayal. This was a system, a machine, one designed to profile, select, and emotionally dismantle high-value individuals using controlled relationships, stress models, and engineered trauma. Suddenly, every moment of the past year started shifting in my mind. The fight we had over the thermostat that spiraled into a 3-day silent treatment. The way she'd suddenly wanted to reconnect, only to disappear again after I opened up. Even her comment about the champagne giving her divorce headaches wasn't random. It was a trigger phrase from one of the behavior mapping logs Claudia gave me. Mira had been working off a script. But then I remembered something. Something small. Something weird. 9 months ago, I came home from a grocery run and found her sitting on the stairs, crying silently, holding an old photo of us from the day we moved into our first apartment. I asked her what was wrong, and she shook her head and said, "I don't want to hurt you." At the time, I assumed it was about money. Or maybe she felt guilty for being distant. But now I realized that moment wasn't part of the model. It wasn't in any file. It wasn't logged or documented. And that scared me more than anything else. Because it meant that somewhere, buried beneath whatever role she was playing, the real Mira had surfaced for a second. And that meant there was a chance she was in too deep. I sat down on the motel floor again, this time pulling out an old hard drive where I kept my non-patent work. Things Mira had never touched. Things I never shared with anyone. I wasn't looking for blueprints or invoices this time. I was looking for memories. Photos. Conversations. The moments in between that might show me where the break started. Not because I missed her, but because if I was going to expose all of this, I needed to know the one thing none of the files, transcripts, or surveillance reports could tell me. Was Mira Ellison a traitor or a prisoner? It started with a blurry photo. Not one of mine. Not from the flash drive Claudia gave me. It was in an old Dropbox folder I hadn't touched in years, back when Mira and I still shared accounts. I was combing through it in the dark, hoping for something. Anything. That didn't feel like a lie. I had already scrolled past birthdays, beach trips, blurry selfies with bad filters. They all looked like props now, like someone had layered nostalgia over manipulation to keep me quiet. But then I landed on an untitled JPEG, uploaded on August 14th, for summers ago. It showed Mira standing in front of a rundown 2-story house, with chipped siding and a rotting porch. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't posing. She looked like she'd just been caught sneaking off the property. Her eyes were wide, one hand half lifted as if she was about to wave, but changed her mind. And behind her, in the basement window, there was the faint silhouette of another girl. I stared at that image for almost an hour. I didn't recognize the house. Mira had never mentioned it. But something about her face told me it wasn't a random photo. It was connected to everything. I yanked the GPS metadata from the file and plugged it into a map. The house was in Riverton, Vermont, a speck of a town I'd only heard her mention once, and only in passing. I remember asking her, "Where's Riverton?" And she'd said, "Nowhere worth remembering." I booked a flight for the next morning. It was a 6-hour drive from the nearest airport, through pine forests that felt untouched by time. By the time I pulled up to the address, it was raining, and the house looked exactly like the photo, only worse. A foreclosure notice had been stapled to the door. Grass waist high, porch sagging, windows boarded from the inside. But the basement window, the one from the photo, was still intact. I knocked on a neighbor's door, a graying man in his 60s with a faded Red Sox cap and a smoker's cough. I told him I was looking for information about the previous residents. He squinted at me. You mean the Ellisons? I froze. She lived here. Yup. Mira and her dad. She left when she was, what, 18? 19? Hasn't been back since. He died a few years ago. Mean son of a bitch, if you don't mind me saying. What about the girl in the basement? I asked, immediately regretting how it sounded. He looked confused. What girl? I showed him the photo. He stared at it for a long time. Then his face darkened. I never saw anyone else go in or out of that house. But we used to hear things. Screaming sometimes. High-pitched. Like a kid. Cops came once. Nothing came of it. Nobody wanted to poke around. I asked if Mira ever mentioned her mother. She said she ran off, he said. But honestly, we weren't sure she ever existed. I left without another word. I broke into the house at sunset. I know how that sounds. But at that point, I didn't care. Something was in that house, some root of truth buried under layers of rot and memory, and I was done waiting for permission to dig it up. The inside was a time capsule of a nightmare. Faded wallpaper peeling in strips. A wall clock stuck at 2:14. Children's drawings in crayon tacked to the fridge, one of which showed 3 stick figures, a tall man, a woman with red XS over her eyes, and a small girl trapped behind bars. I found the basement door behind a bookshelf. The handle was broken, replaced with a latch that had been nailed shut from the outside. I pried it open and descended the narrow stairs with a flashlight. The smell hit me first. Mildew, dust, and something older, like time itself, had soured in the air. The walls were lined with scratch marks. There was a mattress on the floor, a rusted bucket in the corner, and on the far wall, drawn in faded chalk, were dozens of tally marks. And a name. Miriam, written over and over again in shaky handwriting. I sat down on the edge of the stairs, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Mira had a sister. Or a twin. Or a ghost. I didn't know. Not yet. But something had happened in this basement. Something Mira never wanted to speak of. Something that maybe even she didn't fully remember. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos. Sent one to Claudia with a single message. You said there was no EM. You were wrong. This time, she replied in under a minute. Get out. Right now? You just triggered something. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. Because as I climbed back up the stairs, I saw the headlights. 2 cars. Black. No plates. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about history. History someone had paid very well to erase. And now I'd seen it. I don't remember how I got away. The cars were still outside when I came up from the basement, parked just beyond the tree line. Lights dimmed, but engines purring like beasts waiting for a signal. My heart was hammering so hard I couldn't think. Claudia's message echoed in my skull. You just triggered something. I didn't go through the front door. I went back down, broke open the basement's old coal chute, and crawled out like a rat into the cold Vermont night. I cut through a field, lost my jacket to a fence spike, and didn't stop running until I hit the road and flagged down a delivery truck by standing directly in its headlights. The driver thought I was on something. I didn't argue. Let him drop me off at a bus station an hour away. Burned the clothes in a trash barrel behind the depot. Bought a hoodie and sweats from a secondhand store with cash. I didn't call anyone. Didn't text. Just rode the midnight bus south like a fugitive, watching every car that passed, convinced I was being followed. And maybe I was. Because when I finally got back to the motel 2 days later, the lock had been broken. Not forced. Picked. Everything inside had been moved. Not stolen. Just repositioned. The trash had been emptied. The curtain drawn an inch higher. The hard drive I had hidden under the bed? Still there. But the casing had been wiped clean of fingerprints. Like someone had opened it, reviewed everything, and put it back just to let me know they could. I sat on the bed for hours with the lights off, playing and replaying the last few days in my head. The photo. The chalk writing. The basement. The second girl. Miriam. E.M. Ezra Callahan's ghost project suddenly didn't feel like an experiment anymore. It felt like a cover-up. Like something that started as science and ended in something much worse. But it wasn't until the night after that the real fracture happened. I was staring at the motel ceiling when the burner phone buzzed. No number. No warning. Just a video file. I stared at it for a full minute before tapping play. It was shaky footage, handheld. Looked like it was recorded on a phone under low light. A woman, standing in what looked like an underground parking garage, pacing near a concrete column. Hair pulled back, bag over one shoulder. Mira, but not like I'd ever seen her. She looked feral, eyes darting, like she hadn't slept in days, like she wasn't sure who she was waiting for, or if they were even real. Then she turned to the camera, as if she could see me, and whispered, "They're not finished, Elias. You think it's about me. It's not. I was a door. You're the key." She stepped closer, and for a second, I could see the bruises around her wrist. She looked like she wanted to cry, but held it back, like she wasn't allowed. They're calling it recursion now. They test the subject, then test how the subject reacts to being tested. Your reaction is part of their control model. She paused, swallowed, eyes full of something too raw to fake. "Don't try to find me. If you do, you'll trigger the reset." And the video cut. No ending. No context. Just static. I watched it 5 times. Looked for watermarks, geotags, metadata. Nothing. Whoever sent it knew how to cover their tracks. But the message was clear. She wasn't out. She wasn't gone. She was still inside the machine, somehow, and now I was too deep to walk away. I didn't sleep that night. My dreams were broken loops. The basement. The drawings. Her eyes. My own face reflected in a camera I didn't know was there. The next morning, Claudia messaged me again. Only this time, she didn't sound like a ghost. She sounded terrified. "Callahan's pattern is shifting. I think you've destabilized the primary model. We need to meet. But not online. Not by phone. In person only. One last time." She gave me an address in New York. A shipping warehouse near the water. Said I had 2 days. And I knew, somehow, if I didn't go, I'd never hear from her again. But even as I booked the car and packed my gear, one thought haunted me. What did Mira mean by reset? And why did it feel like it had already started? The warehouse smelled like rust and river water. Seagulls screamed in the distance, and the only light came from a flickering bulb that swung lazily near the ceiling. It was early, 6:12 a.m. I had driven all night, slept in the car for an hour, and paced the last few blocks on foot, making sure I wasn't being followed. Claudia was already there. She stood near a stack of cargo crates, her coat wrapped tight around her like she didn't trust the air. She looked older than the last time I saw her. Not tired, just weathered, like someone who'd spent years carrying truths no one believed. "You came," she said. "Because I need this to end," I replied. She nodded, motioned for me to follow. We walked deeper into the shadows, where the sound of the city faded into stillness. Claudia didn't speak for a while. Then, finally, there was never a second girl in the basement. My chest tightened. What? The girl in the photo? That wasn't a sister. That was her. Mira, at age 6. She pulled out a photo from her pocket, an old, sun-damaged Polaroid. The same house, same basement window, but this time, the face behind the glass was clearer, and it was unmistakably Mira. She was held down there by her father for nearly 2 years. Locked away, isolated, her mind fractured under the trauma. That's where they found her, where Callahan's people stepped in. They posed as child psychologists. Promised healing. Promised a future. I swallowed hard. So you're telling me she was one of their first subjects? Claudia nodded. She wasn't just a participant, Elias. She was their prototype. She became the blueprint for how they'd manipulate others. They raised her to believe emotional destruction was connection. That control was love. They taught her to map minds, to test thresholds. But there was one thing they couldn't erase. Her eyes locked with mine. You. My hands were shaking. I don't understand. She was assigned to you the moment your patent hit Tier 3 viability. They planned the whole thing. Groomed her to infiltrate, control you. But then something went wrong. She started breaking protocol, protecting you in small ways, delaying steps, feeding you false positives so the system wouldn't collapse you too early. Claudia reached into her bag and handed me one last file. She failed her final audit. They were going to replace her. That's why she filed for divorce. She thought if she removed herself, she could save you from being fully dismantled. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing. She didn't betray you, Elias, Claudia said. She disobeyed them. Silence stretched between us. Then I asked the one question that still mattered. Is she alive? Claudia hesitated. Then she nodded. She's in a safe house. They think she's dead. I staged it. But I can't protect her forever. And I can't keep you in the dark anymore. If you still care, if you still want to, there's a way to reach her. She handed me a phone. A single contact stored inside. I left the warehouse at sunrise. Drove until the signal bars disappeared. Pulled over in a clearing surrounded by pine trees and wind. And I called her. It rang once. Twice. Then her voice, soft and unsure. Elias? My breath hitched. I hadn't heard her say my name in weeks. But it still landed like an anchor in my chest. I know everything now, I whispered. There was silence on the line. Then a sound. A quiet exhale, like she'd been holding her breath for years. Then you know I never wanted to hurt you. I know, I said. And I don't care how long it takes. I just want to see you again. Her voice broke. I'm not the same girl you married, she said. I'm not the same man you were assigned, I replied. A pause. And then a laugh. Small. Real. Do you remember the sandwich shop in Raleigh? She asked. The one with the sunflower booths? I smiled for the first time in what felt like years. DeMarco's. You used to bring me those ridiculous triple-deckers. Meet me there, she said. I opened my mouth to respond, but the call ended. Not abruptly. Not maliciously. Just ended. Like the final line of a chapter. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel broken. I felt like the storm had passed. Like maybe, just maybe, there was something waiting on the other side of all this. Something real. I started the car. Turned the wheel toward Raleigh. Toward a sunflower booth. Toward the one person who had every reason to destroy me. And chose to save me instead.